Hey guys, today's story is about Chris, Part 3. Warning, this post has spoilers for the 5e starter set and a little bit for the Storm King's Thunder. Chris rejoins after his sob story, and at the behest of the other players who just wanted to play D&D, all that's left is the secret mine that constitutes the finale. The party spend the first session preparing for the trip, and this is where I encounter the first red flag and the first signs that Chris didn't give a crap and felt like his cheating was now condoned. As part of the prep, Chris makes a point of buying holy water, because you never know when you might need this. Yes, you do, Chris. You know exactly what that's for. It was at this point, too, that Chris and Deb's characters hook up in game. At the beginning of the campaign, I'd said I didn't want to play through explicit sexual stuff, and everyone agreed. But now they were role-playing their characters admitting their love for each other, then started awkwardly narrating their resulting PDA. Chris says, "I take her to our room in the inn and remove her monk robes." I cut it off and said, "Let's cut to the black here. Your characters shared a room at the inn, and we can leave the rest to the imagination." Chris is miffed, as is Deb. Adam and Barry both remind them of what we all agreed on in Session 0. I run the mine pretty much by the book because I didn't have a whole lot of free time for prep, and because Storm King's Thunder just came out, and I had plans to transition from the Lost Mine to that module while pretending like I was homebrewing. I figured the adventure would be too new for Chris to cheat with, and was an open enough sandbox to make his cheating not really matter anyway. In the mine, it becomes the Deb and Chris show. They both know exactly when where the enemies are, where to look for loot, etc. Adam and Barry are getting frustrated. They end up having to take a long rest in the mine. The party locks down a room with some pittons wedged under the doors, which is a good idea from Barry. On Chris's watch, he decides he wants to narrate slipping into Deb's bedroll. I tell him no. He keeps going. I throw a roaming pack of ghouls at them who barge through the door. Chris is mad because presumably Deb's passive perception should have been high enough to have heard them coming. Not when she's occupied with you trying to slip it in, dude. At the end of the day, with no resources, it's a tough fight. And Deb goes down and fails 2 death saves before they can help. The couple is mad because I'd interrupted their virtual tabletop sexy times. Barry is mad because his really good idea of locking down the room didn't work. The only other highlight from the mine was the flame skull. Remember the holy water that Chris brought? It was for this. It was a tough fight, and Chris wanted to avoid it altogether. But Adam and Barry would sometimes face roll a room just to screw with Chris. They made it through, then Chris dumped the holy water on the flame skull's remains. Just in case! My eyes rolled out of my head at that point, but I was just going to bear it until the Storm King's Thunder. The starter set ends, they get some downtime. The squad is now level 5, so we're starting Chapter 3 of Storm King's Thunder, which will be abbreviated as SKT. SKT has 3 ways to run the initial call to action encounter. Each one puts the players in a different town on the Sword Coast, and the encounters are very different. I don't tell them we're running the module. I just give them a quest to get their butts up to a city in the north called Bryn, Shander. I'm prepping the Bryn Shander encounter and see Chris and Deb are logged into the game and roll 20. They keep making rolls while I'm trying to prep, so I jump into the Discord to ask them to clear out for a bit, or to see if they need help with something. They were acting out the scenes that I wouldn't let them. They also didn't notice me enter the chat, so I had to clear my throat, and when I did, they both just disconnected. I sent them both messages that whatever they do on their own time is whatever, but they needed to use a personal voice chat for that, to which I got no response. The party makes their way to Bryn Shander. With random encounters, Chris doesn't have much to work with, but he was dang sure to know exactly what each enemy's weaknesses were, as well as their HP. He would second-guess my math when he'd expect the enemy to be bloodied. The encounter in Bryn Shander consists of a massive ice giant attack. The players take control of NPCs around town in addition to their own characters. If the NPCs survive, they will be rewarded with a quest from that NPC. The group had met some of these NPCs already, but this encounter was how I was introducing others to the party. I drew a giant non-contiguous map of sections of the town to scale down the 3 or 4 separate encounters across the city, and gave NPC stat blocks to each player. Chris insisted on a particular NPC, which was a red flag that maybe I hadn't been crafty enough pretending like I was homebrewing. He really wanted the NPC's quest in particular. I don't even remember what it was, but at that time it stood out as an indication that my attempt to shake his cheating had failed. Either way, battle ensues, and Chris is trying to keep his NPC out of danger, but the encounters were set up to be dangerous. A giant boulder hits the NPC Chris, and he goes down. No one around has healing, and all the medicine checks to stabilize fail. Adam's NPC dies too, but they win the battle and drive off the giants. Chris is clearly upset that his NPC died, and he tries to argue that he should be able to bring the NPC back. I tell him that thems are the breaks, no resurrections, no retcons, and then he has the audacity to complain about my choice of town for the first attack. He had apparently read the new adventure module, and was hoping I would take them to one of the other towns to start the module instead, specifically Tribor, because it was more interesting. I call him a piece of crap cheater, and ask that he leave the game. He then says he quits because I wouldn't give him enough RP time with Deb. He and Deb disconnect. Chris then left a message for me the next day, cataloging all of his beefs with my DM style, and how I needed to find a new hobby. Adam and Barry aren't mad at the cheating because, after all, even with all the cheating, we almost died a bunch of times. However, they still resigned from the game because they didn't feel like finding 2 new players, and they wanted it to end at the end of the starter set in the first place. So just like that, the game fizzles out. The story, however, does have a happy ending. I took a year off of DMing after that, and then found a new group to DM through Tomb of Annihilation. We played it every week for a year straight, and they got through the whole thing. It was epic, and fun, and super rewarding. Here you, Chris. Well, guys, I'm kinda sad to say that there is no more Chris stories. There's only 3 parts to this. But at that same point, it's probably best thing for the DM's sanity that there was no more parts after this. I think it's pretty creepy that you want to describe what kind of intimate acts you want to do to another person with a bunch of individuals who just want to play the game and not focus on you and your fantasies. Well, guys, that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed, and have a good one.
After all, even with all the cheating, we almost died a bunch of times.